Welcome to Series 3 of Sensitive Changemakers, the podcast for ambitious HSPs and introverts. So if you're a sensitive, introverted coach, therapist, creative, or service provider with big dreams, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Kate Carter, a fellow HSP and introvert who understands the unique challenges and incredible strengths we bring to the table. In this space, I'm here to help you embrace your sensitivity, release the anxiety and self-doubt that may be holding you back, and build the confidence to create success on your terms. If you're ready to step into your quiet power, align your business with your true self, and live a life of intention, purpose, and authenticity, then this is for you. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, I hope this week, as always, is going well for you. This Monday especially just seems to have gone really, really quickly. I feel like I haven't stopped so far, and yet the day is already past lunchtime. So it just feels absolutely crazy. So I hope that yours is going a little bit better. Well, a little bit calmer maybe. Okay, so today we are talking about the highly sensitive energy behind running a business. And this has come up in my own kind of life and my own business, but it's also come up in a few client calls. So I wanted to bring it to this kind of platform and talk about it a little bit here as well, because I think it's a really important one. I think there is so much noise in the online space, and rightly or wrongly, we as highly sensitives and introverts really do listen to what is going on in our industry, in our space, because we want to do the best job possible. And so we listen and we act on those things. We're very ambitious, very hardworking. We show up, we do the work, we action the things that we should be actioning, or that we told that we should be actioning. And what I feel that gets left out quite a lot is the difference between taking action and leaning into something that is going to support you, and leaning back and taking that rest and taking that time when it's needed, and how to know when to do either or, when to know when to lean in and take that action and show up, and when to lean back and rest and restore. And one of the reasons that I think this is because of all of that online noise where we think we have to keep doing. And yes, absolutely, taking action, doing the work is incredibly important, but it's not necessarily, and I've got a post coming up about this week, it's not necessarily about doing the hard work. And I know this is really frustrating. It definitely was for me, as somebody who has spent most of her life putting in the hard work to get where I am today. You know, hard work and effort has always equaled success for me. And I know that's true for a lot of people in here. I know that's true for a lot of my clients as well, that we assume that we can put the work in and the success comes the other side. And I think when we're running a business, when we are doing this work, when we are starting a movement, whether that is bigger than ourselves or, just for our family, we can get caught in that trap of thinking that as long as we do all of the hard work and put in all of the effort, then our success is inevitable. And yes, there is an element of work. Like I said, there is an element of putting that effort in. We can't get that without those two things. But I do think there is more nuance and more detail to this. I do feel, and I've spoken about this before, I do think mindset is a huge part of this. Energy is a huge part of this, but also what we're going to be talking about today. So I am going to be talking about one specific part of this. Please bear in mind that I'm aware that, like I said, mindset and energy have a huge piece here as well. But I do want to talk about this leaning in and leaning back energy. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I think it's part of this puzzle. When we think that it's all about hard work, I want to invite you to see a different perspective today and see something a little bit different. So, first of all, just having a recap on what it is to be highly sensitive. So we do process information so much more deeply. We do feel emotions more intensely. And I would go as far as to say that actually some of that emotion and some of that information that we process is really attuned to those subtle details and those subtle energy shifts. And it's such a strength, but it also can be a challenge in business because we're so aware of those little shifts and nuances and details. That's where this putting in all of the effort and thinking that hard work equals success sometimes comes from. And I really want you to see both sides of the coin today. I want you to see how having that sensitivity around being really attuned to subtle details and energy shifts can be such a gift. And I also want you to see the flip side of that as, because everything's got a flip side, hasn't it? I want you to see the flip side of that as how it can be a challenge in business when we allow that to run us, when we allow that to run how we want to run our business. So I want you, first of all, to appreciate and normalize how external factors for us, like noise, crowds, social interaction can really overwhelm us, and it can affect our decision making process and our creativity. And the reason it does this is because what I've been alluding to so far, you've got all of this noise, we're so attuned to the details and the shifts, and we think that we have to act on every single part of it. And it really can get us into a little bit of a bind where we think we'll just do more, we'll just do more, we'll just do more. And actually one of the biggest things that we need to do is lean back and start to trust ourselves. There has to be that balance. I don't think, on the flip side of what I'm saying here, I don't think if we're constantly leaning back and if we're constantly thinking about everything coming to us, I don't think that's going to be great for us either. I think that can be really frustrating for us because we think, well, where is it? I've been doing the leaning back and I've been doing the kind of more, and I do believe in manifesting and energy and all of that. But if we're only doing that, again, the balance is off. And I do believe it's about meeting the two in the middle. It's about really understanding you better and understanding when it is best for you to lean forward and when it is best for you to lean back and actually recalibrate and rest and restore. So I hope that makes sense so far. I know, as I said, this is quite nuanced, but I really do think it's an important part of this. We do need to ground in our truth, remember who we are, remember why we're doing this, trusting ourselves to know when to take action and when to rest and when to lean back. So the first thing I want you to think about, and we're going to talk about when to lean in. So we're going to really split this down. We've talked about highly sensitives, what it means for us, why we get overwhelmed, why we're caught in that loop of doing, and then getting frustrated when we don't see the results. I first want to talk about knowing when to lean in. Okay, so this is not about hustle. Okay, I hate the word hustle at the best of times, but this is not about hustle and this is not about constant activity. For highly sensitives, for us, this means engaging deeply with our work and in a way that aligns with our values and vision. Now, when we talk about doing less better, this is what I mean. And when I work with clients, I really want to find the crossover between the gap. And by gap, I mean normally there's a tweak or there's a missed opportunity somewhere within the process that you have in your business. So I want to find that. But I also want to link that and find that crossover with the uncomfortableness. What is the thing that around that gap, around that opportunity, are you avoiding? And let's dig a little bit deeper into why you are avoiding that. What is it that is making you think, I don't want to do that? And the reason I talk about this is because, and I feel that my background in teaching really does give me an extra layer of understanding here, because I know teaching and I'm a good teacher. I know what it is like to learn. I know the process of learning. I know when we learn best, when we grow best. I've done so much work on this. It's been such a big part of my life. And I know that we don't learn and we don't grow when we are doing the things that we find comfortable. Now, you've heard you don't learn in your comfort zone, but I want to take this a step further. And I'm going to bring in Adam Grant's work here because I'm just reading his book. I think he's great. Just reading his book, Hidden Potential. And he talks about, so this was, I'm going off a bit of a tangent here, but it does have a role in this. So when I first started my teacher training back in 2005, there was VAC learning, which is visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And the aim was, when you were planning lessons, when you were teaching, it was to make sure that your resources and your lessons met the different learners. So you were going to have some students in your class that were visual, some in your class that were auditory, and some that were kinesthetic. Now, Later on in life, when I was doing my NLP training, this came up again, but a different way. And I do think there is a really good place for using VAC, of understanding whether you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. But in teaching, the idea was that as long as you created resources and lessons that met your learners where they were in terms of their visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. So first of all, you really needed to know what your kids were, and then you needed to make sure that they had resources to learn through that. That was then a good lesson, and your students could then make progress because they were learning in their natural way. However, we have, in the UK anyway, VAC doesn't appear in teaching at all, hasn't done for quite a while, because they know that it actually doesn't support learners to learn and to grow. Because if you're constantly learning on your natural way, you're not actually stretching yourself or learning something completely new. You learn when you are uncomfortable. You learn through discomfort. You learn by applying yourself in different ways. So this story that Adam Grant talks about is Steve Martin. If you don't know Steve Martin, that I'm presuming most people do. He wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and as the story goes, please go and read his book, it's great. But as the story goes, he showed up on stage and just got heckled, and at worst and at best just no laughs at all for a long period of time. And he was talking about what he was doing at the time was he was looking at other stand-up comedians out there, taking what they were doing and then listening and then applying it to his own stand-up, and that's what he kept doing. And it wasn't until he started writing. Now he talks about how writing was his uncomfortableness, it was his discomfort, it was the thing that he wasn't really interested in, and it was actually his path to success. So it was the very thing that he didn't want to do that actually led to the success. Now he found a way of enjoying the writing. So what I want to just caveat this by saying is I'm not saying you have to do things you don't like doing, okay? Especially in businesses, we're creating our businesses on our own terms. That's not what this is about. What I am saying is that there will be something you are avoiding. There will be some kind of discomfort that you are pulling away from rather than leaning into. And this is where the magic happens. You then find your own way, the way that you want to process that in that discomfort, in being uncomfortable. So there is a real kind of nuance to that. And this is where the magic lies. So when like I said, when I'm talking to a client, I really want to get that crossover point. I want to get to that gap, that opportunity. You know, sometimes there literally is a gap. An example might be that you have 200 people on your email list that you do not email. Okay, so that might be the gap, the opportunity to actually look at that. And the uncomfortableness around that might be, well, I don't actually know what to write. I don't know how to formulate emails or what to say. That is where the magic then lies. It's bringing those two things together. It's doing less better because we're not trying to be everywhere at once. We're looking at the gap, the opportunity, and where that discomfort is. And those are the opportunities for HSPs and for us to delve deeper, to lean in. That is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about leaning in. Those are the bits that you really want to go deeper into. So I hope that makes sense so far. That's the bits I find that most of us don't talk about, but it really is the magic. Okay, so really leaning into that kind of area of discomfort, of avoidance, along with that gap or opportunity within your business. Okay, so really very much doing less better. Let me know if you've got any questions about that. Hope that makes sense so far. The other area that I want to talk about when we're talking about leaning in is so many of us highly sensitives have a very strong intuition and empathy. And I feel that sometimes in society as well, we get told that it's rubbish, don't listen, just follow logic, follow the facts, follow the information. And again, with everything that I ever talk about, I feel like I'm talking about this balance. Yes, research, information, finding out things, so important. but not to the detriment of your energy or your like levels of exhaustion or anything like that. We really want to find a balance between knowing enough and then leaning into our intuition as highly sensitives. And I've been speaking to quite a few clients about this, like, where are you trusting yourself to lean in rather than falling back on what somebody else has said? That's where true authority comes from. This is where true leadership comes from. And the more you do this, the more this is going to transform your messaging and your content as well, because you're going to stand out as somebody who trusts themselves and you're not just copying what somebody else is doing. And on the back of that, I'm going to write, I think, a piece of content around this because it was such an interesting conversation. Somebody on Facebook at the weekend put a post up and said, why is it that all coaches sound the same? And there was so many threads, links, comments underneath that were really detriment to the coaching space. And a couple of years ago, that would have really triggered me. Even last year, I think, would have triggered me into, that's really unfair, because so many coaches work incredibly hard. And yes, we do. And there are so many of us that are very well qualified and very good at what we do. But I do think, on reflection, what she was saying was what we're talking about here. How many of us, we don't have to be coaches, but how many of us as business owners, as entrepreneurs, are finding that balance between having the information, finding the information, knowing enough knowledge, and then trusting ourselves and having that self-trust to know when to lean in, when to do the work, when to action something, when to say something, when to talk about something that might feel very intuitively current and needed right now. So again, that balance between the two. And I think going back to that post, I think what she was saying was there's so many people, and again, I'm not going to restrict it just to coaches, but I do think there are so many people out there, which is where I think this kind of part, like an ounce of truth was coming from. I do think it was a really unfair post, but where an ounce of truth was coming from was that there are so many coaches who don't have that self-trust, who don't have that self-belief, that they are just looking at what everybody else is doing and emulating that. And I know where that comes from. It comes from a place of, well, they're making it work, let me look like them. And actually what I want you to do as a HSP, as an introvert, is to lean into you, into your intuition, into your gut feeling. And I know you know, it may not be a skill or a muscle that you have worked very often. And I can put my hand up here because I think I felt like the least intuitive person 8-9 years ago. Like, if you'd said to me, what does your intuition say? I would said, I have no idea what that sounds like. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But it was there. When I look back, it was there. I just never listened to it because I always put logic, information, knowledge, other people and what they were doing above me. And I think this is such permission given for you as highly sensitives to take that back. Again, we're taking that control back, that power back, and saying, I know enough. And I know most of you do, because I know how hard you work. I know how much you qualify. You've done your qualifications, you've researched, you've studied. You've done that. You've got the knowledge. How many of you actually then start to lean in to your intuitive side, to that voice who says, you've done enough today? Or that voice that says, this feels sticky, but I think it's the way we need to go. Those voices, how often do we listen to them? How often do we actually lean into them? So again, that real balance between the two there. And like I said, I really feel that if you can encapsulate this, if you can ground yourself in this, this is when things shift. This is when your messaging changes. This is when you don't sound like every other coach out there, because it's you and it's coming from that grounded truth. So that's a second way of leaning in. I hope that makes sense so far. And the last one, which might sound a little bit left field, but I think it's really important here, especially as highly sensitives, is when to lean into support. And the reason I say this is because you've got so much going on, I know, in your lives, but you've also got so much coming in terms of external noise it's really easy to get overwhelmed, and so many of us as highly sensitives and introverts aren't great at asking for help. We're not great at leaning into that support. And so again, an invitation here, and they're always talking about balance, you know, having that self-trust and that self-groundedness of, I know me, I know what's best for me, and obviously understanding that we're all on a journey, we're all learning and growing always. You've got that side of things, but also, do you know what? This is tough and I need some support, and it's okay to ask and to lean into that support. An example, a real kind of concrete example is when I'm working with one-on-one clients, I have a in-between session support through Basecamp. And I know that there are so many hard-working clients that I work with who don't use Basecamp to its full potential because they don't lean into that support. So they lean in during the sessions, but they could lean in that in-between support and ask questions and just check in with things or get me to check over things. And they don't fully lean in there. So that's hopefully a really concrete example of just how you can lean into support and how you can make the most of that, because that will then support you with those boundaries and with really looking after your energy levels as well, and having somebody there who can reflect these things back to you and say, we've been here before, this is, you know, knowing your patterns, knowing your stories, this is something you've experienced before. Do we think it's time to lean back here, or do we think it's time to lean in? And just having somebody to have that conversation with. So I hope that makes sense. So those are the opportunities I see for us as highly sensitives to lean in to doing the work, maybe not the work that society thinks is hard work, but the work nonetheless that's really important for us as highly sensitives. Okay, I'm just going to have a little bit of water and then we're going to move on to when to lean back. Oh, okay, I'm just going to check that I haven't got any questions, because sometimes it doesn't always come up here. No, I think we're good. Okay, so when to lean back. This is really, it's not going to be too dissimilar to what we were talking about there. But I'm going to be talking about it a little bit more detail. We are talking about here when it's important to lean back, when it's important to rest and recharge and take that time for us. So the first thing I'm going to say is probably not a big shocker for any of us who are highly sensitives, and that is we need more time to rest and process information. I was talking to the wonderful Alice in here. I posted about whether we're feeling tired at the moment with the season change, because normally, going off on a side tangent here, normally I'm awake at like 6 quite easily. Like I'm a morning person, I'm not an evening person. I like to go to bed quite early, but I am a morning person, and just recently I've just been finding it very, very difficult to get up and get moving. And so I put a thread in the Facebook group saying, is anybody else feeling tired? I definitely am at the moment. Alice was talking about how she's been traveling and doing lots of different things, and so she feels tired, but she couldn't put her finger into what the one thing was, because she'd been doing quite a few different things. And I said, yes, isn't it so wonderful to go and see different things? Like, I love traveling, I love going to see different people and things like that, but when I get home, it's almost like my brain and body shuts down for a little bit. You'll find me just staring into space, because it's almost like I need to recalibrate. Like, my brain and body just need to recalibrate. So that's what I mean here. We just need that time to process information. I'm quite lucky that I'm in a family of quite deep thinkers. My husband's a deep thinker, even my kids are deep thinkers, and we all do in our own little way take ourselves away for processing information. So my daughter and my son, obviously it's just the way they've been brought up with me and my husband, but they will say something like, I just need some time on my own for like 5-10 minutes, and they'll go away for a little bit and then they'll come back. And I think that's very much obviously how they've been brought up, like I said, because I know I do that. Like, I will just take myself away somewhere and just say, right, I just need, 10-15 minutes just to recalibrate, just to think about things. So that is such an important part of being highly sensitive, and it is not a weakness, because if we allow ourselves to do that, that's when we have the aha moments. That's when things click into place. That's when we can trust ourselves to lean more into that intuitive side of us, because we're giving ourselves the time to process those thoughts and all of the things that have been happening to us. So these are the times that we need to lean back. And I would say here, if you're not giving yourself any time to rest and recharge, how can you, that's your first point of call, how can you actually start to put some of that time into your week where you are actually leaning back? And it can be whatever is right for you. This is such an independent and individual thing. I know that I find doing this before my kids get up and my husband get up, because there's no guilt. If I'm doing something for me before anybody else is awake, the guilt is not there. I've done so much work over reducing guilt generally, but you know, it's still there. There is still very much an aspect of guilt. So I know for me, getting up before my kids and my husband are awake, allowing myself that time to do some meditation, to do a little bit of work, just giving myself space. Most of the time it's in the form of meditation and journaling and just thinking space, which I don't necessarily get once the day has started and I'm, you know, taking kids to school, having client calls, etc. So that for me is mine, and I would really invite you to think about, when is yours? When are you giving yourself that time to process, to think, to rest, taking that quiet time to reflect and engage in something different, something that's more about self-care, that helps you to restore your energy. So that's the first part of really kind of leaning back. The second one is recognizing your signs of burnout and exhaustion. So as we were saying right at the start, there's always these flip sides. There's a strength and then a kind of downside to each thing. So where your sensitivity is turning into overwhelm or burnout, and I don't mean it as in to blame you or anybody here, it's just having a real awareness of when we are going down too many rabbit holes, when we are overthinking something to the degree that we are taking so much longer over something than we normally do. These are all signs for me that I am definitely leaning towards exhaustion and burnout. When I'm hoping this helps anyway, just to give some concrete ideas. So absolutely, when I am taking longer writing a piece of content, when I keep rewording it or tweaking it and things like that, yes, I have to tweak in the first place, because how it comes out of my head, from through my head out of my mouth, necessarily isn't the best, should I say. It does need tweaking, but if I'm constantly tweaking, that's a real good sign for me that I am getting tired, that I'm getting towards burnout. If I am just generally finding things taking so much longer than they normally do, again, that's a sign for me. So I would really invite you to get or create an awareness around your own triggers, should I say, or your own signs of burnout and overwhelm, and then what you can do there to support you. First of all, looking at your boundaries. Where are your boundaries here? Are you just, again, talk about what we were talking about earlier, are you just trying to get the job done? Are you trying to do? If so, what could you do here to support you? Where are your boundaries around this? Could you say, are there situations where you could say no? Are there situations where you can delegate something? Are there situations where you can build systems? Now, I'm not I'm not pro having too many technical funnels, but I do love a few automations because it really supports me. So one of my areas, and I hope this helps in terms of building a system, so you see it as something useful rather than something overwhelming, is I am not great at asking for testimonials or feedback. Either sometimes I just forget, or I do sometimes, and this is definitely in the past, used to kind of slip into people pleasing. I don't want to bother them. I don't want to bother them. Just leave it, it'll be fine. So what I've now got is, when people work with me, I've now got an automated email that goes out and asks for feedback and a testimonial. That to me is a system that supports me. It takes off some of the pressure off my shoulders. I don't have to ask that question. I don't have to worry about asking that question. It is done for me. So that is what I mean when I'm talking about having something or a system in place that is going to support you. Hope that makes sense so far. So really creating awareness around your signs for burnout, and then putting things into place to support that. Now, that might be saying no to something, that might be delegating, that might be creating a system like I just said, that might be just going to do something completely different. I know if I'm taking a long time to do something, I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm just going to go for a walk, do something completely and utterly different, and take my mind off this task that I'm currently trying to do, because I know that I'm getting tired. I know, not necessarily I'm getting to burnout, but I'm definitely getting exhausted. There is definitely that type of tired feeling there. So I hope that makes sense. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is more to do being introverted, which I know a lot of us here are as well. And knowing that your best ideas and strategies often emerge when you're on your own. And this was what we were talking about right at the start, wasn't it? And this leaning out, this leaning back energy is, how can you embrace your need for space? How can you cultivate a quiet source of innovation and clarity, rather than thinking that the only way to succeed is do? Most of the people, me included, the best ideas I've ever had is in white space thinking, where I actually just allow my brain to think. I do partner this with a meditation. If you want me to tell you more about how I do meditation, because it is slightly different to most people, let me know. But I just couple that together, and allowing myself just to think allows so many more ideas, so much more creativity to come out. And I just make notes, and then those become my posts, that becomes my content. So full permission here to do things differently, to really embrace who you are as a HSP and introvert. Know that your best ideas come from solitude. They come from when you're on your own. Those creative hits come from a different source. You don't have to keep doing in all of the ways in order to succeed. And I'm hoping throughout this you can see a different perspective in how to create success. Hard work and effort does not equal success in the entrepreneurial space. And especially as a HSP and introvert, we have to find our own balance and our own way. And that does include embodying all of the strengths of being a HSP and introvert, as we've discussed, but also knowing when that slides into more of the challenging side, and how we can bring ourselves back into that neutral, balanced state where we are benefiting from our strengths and we're not allowing them to control what we're doing as well, or allowing them to control us. So I hope that makes sense. There are just some really actionable steps you can think about here, and I'm just going to put them out there just in case this is something you want to think about. You can, if you've ever tried time blocking might be something. I've done it to varying degrees. I can't say that I've been overly detailed with it, but I have tried time blocking just to give me an idea, and that supported me in, okay, so I'm best at writing content here. Okay, so I'm best at having client calls here. That has what it's enabled me to do, because time blocking had, for me, enabled me to see where my energy levels were best utilized. When do I feel most energetic? Let's put those bits into that time. When am I not so energetic? Okay, so that's the time maybe for some white space thinking, or some for meditation, etc. So time blocking helped me for that. It also enabled me to protect that rest time and that like reflection time, that time just for you. And also creating a work environment that supports your sensitivity. So looking at your actual area, and I know I've spoken about this room quite a lot, for example. This room was originally intended for my husband, because I was working full time when we first moved in here and got this painted. And so most of these, like that one's mine, but that one over there and that one there, those are all of my husband's prints. But his space is very much over the other side of this room, and so I would like to decorate this and make it much more of a neutral ground. That for me, I know, is going to support me to have an environment that I love to work in. So just something as simple as that. The other thing that comes up quite a lot when I'm talking with HSPs and introverts is really aligning yourself with your natural energy rhythms. Now, if you're a woman, this might be your menstrual cycle, and just really getting to grips with your cycle and when your energy levels are at the highest. It might just be hooking into your intuitive side and knowing, like I was saying, through time blocking really supported me in seeing, okay, my energy levels are higher at this time of the day and they're lower at this time of the day. How can I best utilize that in my business? So really just having some good tangible actions or action tools that you can use and just explore a little bit to understand yourself better. But the whole point of this particular masterclass was today to really invite you to, first of all, look at when to lean in and also when to lean back, and using your HSP and introvert energy in such a powerful way here. So I hope this has all made sense. If you do have any questions, please do let me know. I'm sending you so much love, guys, and I will be back next week with another masterclass. Okay, take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you have any takeaways or any questions, please do reach out to me either through Instagram, LinkedIn or Facebook at Kate Carter Coaching, or you can email me at kate@katecarter.co.uk. I always love to hear your feedback and the things that you have taken from the podcast. If you know of any other highly sensitive people, then please do share this so that I can reach more and support more highly sensitive people to embrace their strengths and gifts. As a thank you, I will pick a winner every month for a free 50-minute coaching session with me. Thank you so much.